Hi everyone, this is Ron Litman, and I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And with me is my co-author, Dr. Phoebe Mainland. Hi Phoebe.
Hi Ron.
So what we're going to do here is talk for a few minutes about an article we published in Pediatric Anesthesia about some of the new connectors that are coming out, rolling out in the next few years to prevent wrong route medication errors. Now, Dr. Mainland was the recipient of a Churchill Fellowship. Phoebe, why don't you start by just telling us what is that fellowship and what did it entail?
Thanks, Ron. The Churchill Fellowship is awarded by the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust in Australia to support Australians to travel to investigate international best practice. My fellowship was awarded for my project to look at how different jurisdictions were preparing for the introduction of devices with new connectors, non-Lure connectors. This was based on some work that I've been doing in my role as representing Australia on ISO Committee, International Organisation for Standardisation, for a series of connectors to replace Lure, which will be kept for intravascular and hypodermic applications. But
why do we need to do this? What's the problem with the Lures right now?
The problem with the Lure is it's such a good connector. It's used on devices used for different, well, for many applications. So there is an automatic fit between the applications when they're not intended to. For example, epidural infusions can be hooked up to an intravenous access port, which is Lure. They're both Lure. So to reduce the incidence of wrong route medications, the replacing Lure with a specific connector for a specific application.
I see. So what's been happening is that people have been accidentally connecting intravascular with epidural or spinal or even intragastric connectors and causing patient harm, right?
That's right, and there's several case reports, fatalities as well as even near misses.
So can you tell us a little bit about the solutions to all this, what we wrote about in the article?
Well, by having these different connectors, it means that it's an engineering design to reduce the interconnectability between devices intended for different applications, routes of application. And these include the epidural or neural and blood pressure cuff, and to come will be respiratory connectors.
So in other words, each connector's own separate physical connection can't be interconnected with the others, right?
That's correct.
So when you got your fellowship, you traveled around the world looking to see what institutions were doing to enact these changes. Is that correct?
That's right, and particularly of interest was the UK because they had changed to non-Lure connectors for spinal and epidural devices in the past, and they'd learnt from their experience and have a very good plan for when the standardised ISO connectors are introduced later. Their experiences in the past was based firstly on a problem that there were multiple proprietary connectors, whereas what we're going to have now is one standardised connector for epidural and spinal. And despite that, once the market chose which one, they've had a lot of success, and since then there's been no reported case of intrathecal administration of drugs intended for intravascular, for example, chemotherapy.
And what about the United States? There's a number of places now that have switched over to a different kind of enteral connection. Is that correct?
That's right, and that there is the standardised ISO connector. The manufacturers have named it ENFIT, and this is a reverse orientation connector. So rather than the male end being on the syringe, the male end is on the patient device. Been a lot of experience when I was doing my fellowship last year, but I believe that it's been a successful rollout. One of the problems is identifying the range of devices that would need to be changed to incorporate the new connectors.
I see. And what advice would you give to healthcare providers out there who have not yet changed over to either the NFID or the neuraxial?
The recommendations from my report at the end of my fellowship was that pointing out that this is not just for clinicians, healthcare professionals. This is a whole logistics systems approach that's needed, that the stakeholders include not only the manufacturers and clinicians, but also pharmacists, logistics and materials, supplies, and stocking issues. So there needs to be communication between all of the stakeholders for a particular area so that there can be a planned changeover without chaos, without stocking both the old style and the devices with the new connectors.
Thanks a lot for joining me, Phoebe. This audio for the Journal of Pediatric Anesthesia. It's a really great introduction into the kinds of things that we talk about in our article and the different types of connectors that are coming your way, country by country, right, as different manufacturers roll out their different devices. And this is all an attempt, folks, to eliminate or at least drastically reduce wrong route errors, because, if you're going to inject something that's meant for the intravascular space, but you accidentally inject it into the, say, spinal space, or if you put something that's meant to go enterally into the digestive system and you by accident put it into the intravascular space, then it can result in some pretty significant patient morbidity. Anything else you want to tell our audience before we cut off now?
One thing I think is important, thanks Ron, is that there is monitoring and reporting during the changeover. So please investigate your local reporting systems, and we'd be really willing to and keen to hear from those and update any recommendations for the introduction.
That's great. Well, I hope everyone reads our article, and please give us some feedback on it. And especially if you've got some problems using these new connectors in the future, I hope that you will write into Pediatric Anesthesia and tell the rest of the pediatric anesthesia community about them. Thanks a lot for joining me, Phoebe, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Ron.